Indiana is unfortunately the latest state to pass a near total abortion ban, and the first state to do so after the reversal of Roe in the Supreme Court. Now, Indiana is one of the few red states that actually did not have a trigger law that would immediately come into effect as soon as the Supreme Court reversed Roe. But it didn't matter because the state lawmakers immediately got to work and decided to draft legislation, which unfortunately passed. And this will have major ramifications, not just for the women living in that state, it'll have major ramifications for other women in other states who were relying on Indiana to get the abortion care they needed. Now, the Republican-dominated state Senate approved the legislation 28-19 in a vote that came just hours after it passed Indiana's lower chamber. The bill, which will go into effect soon on September 15th, allows abortion only in cases of rape, incest, lethal fetal abnormality, or when the procedure is necessary to prevent severe health risks or death. But it's never enough for the religious zealots in this country. I want to be clear about that, because apparently this draconian legislation wasn't draconian enough for the religious zealots and the theocratic authoritarians in America. In a statement, anti-abortion group Indiana Right to Life opposed the exceptions and said the new law did not go far enough in cutting abortion access. So if the mother's life is at risk as a result of the pregnancy, let her die. That's how pro-life they are. These exceptions, unacceptable. These people, the fact that they have a stranglehold on red states in this country is so incredibly depressing, especially when it's abundantly clear that they don't care about life at all. The idea that an exception would be made for a woman who might die as a result of a pregnancy complication, like they think it's crazy. That's unacceptable. That's how pro-life they are. So again, this will impact women and girls in the state of Indiana, of course, but there were women in neighboring states that were relying on Indiana to get the reproductive care and abortion care they needed. In fact, not too long ago, a story involving a 10-year-old rape victim who became pregnant was all over the headlines. And this girl had to travel from Ohio to Indiana in order to get an abortion. If she was dealing with a similar issue in September of this year, she would not be able to go to Indiana. Her family would not be able to take her to the state of Indiana to get the abortion she needed as a 10-year-old girl who was impregnated by her rapist. So what happens now? Because fact of the matter is, women are gonna be forced to go through a pregnancy they don't want, months and months of a pregnancy that changes their body, that puts them through a lot physically and emotionally. Then they have to go through childbirth, hours and hours of labor, potentially a C-section where their abdomen is cut open and the baby is taken out that way, possibly a vaginal birth that's certainly traumatic when you want the baby, but also incredibly traumatic when you don't want the baby. But what happens if, let's say, women don't have the means to support the baby that they were forced to have? Is the state of Indiana doing anything about that? Is there any type of social program, any type of support that's being offered to these women who will now be forced to carry a pregnancy to term and forced to give birth to a baby they don't want? Is there anything there? Especially in a country, by the way, that has an incredibly broken healthcare system. Is there any financial support? No. There's no discussion about that. But don't worry, there is discussion about baby drop boxes, because who doesn't want to treat babies as if they're an Amazon return, right? Super pro-life. So let's discuss that a little bit. Indiana has so-called safe haven boxes, okay? They're at fire stations where women can surrender their babies anonymously. So that is the support system that is now sprouting up in response to these draconian laws in red states. All 50 states have safe haven laws meant to protect surrendering mothers from criminal charges. The first, known as the Baby Moses Law, was passed in Texas in 1999 after a number of women abandoned infants in trash cans or dumpsters. But what began as a way to prevent the most extreme cases of child abuse has become a broader phenomenon supported especially among the religious right, of course, which heavily promotes adoption as an alternative to abortion. I should note, we already have a huge adoption crisis in America. We have about, let's see, what are the numbers again? Oh yeah, as of 2020, 407,493 children in foster care, and approximately 117,000 children waiting to be adopted. So it's not like there's a shortage of kids who need to be adopted, but it's okay. The right wing would like you to completely ignore that and pretend as though adoption is the best option if you find yourself with an unwanted pregnancy, even an unwanted pregnancy as a result of rape, by the way. So the adoptions themselves could also be problematic. You should know about that. With women potentially unaware that they are terminating parental rights and children left with little information about their origins. If a parent is using a safe haven, there's been a crisis and the system has already in some way failed, said Ryan Hanlon, president of the National Council for Adoption. So there are other issues with the safe haven adoption method, because again, does the woman or girl who is giving up the baby know that she is giving up all rights to that child? What if she changes her mind? How does that all work out? In recent years, there have been over 100,000 domestic adoptions annually and more than 600,000 abortions. Studies show that the vast majority of women denied abortions are uninterested in adoption and end up going on to raise their children, with no support, by the way, from the individuals who forced them to have the children in the first place. And when I say no support, I mean no financial support. Childcare is outrageously expensive. I don't know how they're expected to go to work and provide a living for the baby they were forced to have when they don't have the option of childcare because it's astronomically expensive. But nonetheless, there's no one in state government focusing on that. They're focusing on baby drop boxes instead. Monica Kelsey, by the way, is the right-wing founder of Safe Haven Baby Boxes. She learned about the use of these drop boxes when she was traveling and learned about how they were using these in medieval Europe. She's like, yo, medieval Europe, they knew what they were doing. Let's bring it back to the United States. Great, that's awesome. To use one of Monica Kelsey's boxes, a parent pulls open a metal drawer to reveal a temperature-controlled hospital bassinet. Once the baby is inside and the drawer is closed, it locks automatically. The parent cannot reopen it. An alarm is triggered and the facility staff can access the bassinet. The box also sends out a 911 call. According to Kelsey, she says that the baby is tended to within 2 minutes. But she is the person who founded this whole baby box situation, so I would take her statement with a grain of salt. I don't know if that's actually true. So far, I haven't read any reports indicating that the babies that have been given up in this way have suffered any type of physical consequence. They seem to be okay, but there are other issues. Is this infant being surrendered without coercion? Is this a parent who is in a bad spot and could benefit from some time and a discussion in a warm handoff experience to make their decision? That's Micah Orlis. He's the director of a safe surrender clinic at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. In fact, Dr. Orlis of the Los Angeles Safe Haven Clinic performs psychological and developmental evaluations on some 15 such babies annually, often allowing them, following them through their toddler years. His research found that more than half of these children have health or developmental issues, often stemming from inadequate prenatal care. So I just want to focus on that for a second. No discussion about ensuring these women, and in some cases girls, I hate to say it, get the adequate prenatal care they need if they're forced to have these babies. There's no discussion about a social safety net to ensure that they have the economic stability necessary to take on the massive financial burden of having a baby. there's even little discussion. I haven't seen anything in terms of state legislation to discuss, funding for adoption services. Because if you look at red states and what their foster care system looks like, what their adoption system looks like, it's a mess. So it's almost as if they don't really care about the baby's life. Because if the baby is given up by the mother and the baby is just put into the system and the system is underfunded, undervalued, what happens to that baby? Does that baby's life actually matter to the individuals who are implementing these draconian laws on a state level? Doesn't really seem like it. It seems like the religious beliefs, along with this need to punish and control women, is what's taking priority. That's what's at top of mind for these Republican lawmakers who pass these laws. And if Democrats don't call them out on it more effectively in their campaigning, they're honestly the most incompetent politicians imaginable. Because what they're doing here, what Republican lawmakers are doing here, both on a federal and state level, is incredibly unpopular. We just saw that play out with a ballot initiative in Kansas. Kansas's state constitution states that women have the constitutional right to abortions in that state. When right-wingers tried to pass an amendment that would strip the state constitution of that right, the voters in Kansas, a red state, overwhelmingly turned that amendment down. This is unpopular. People don't want the government getting in between them and their doctors and their healthcare decisions. So it's a layup for Democrats. I'd like to see more of a fight from Democratic lawmakers. Unfortunately, I haven't really seen much of that fight, but this is what they're up to. You don't have the money, you don't have the support, you don't have what you need to raise a child that you're forced to have. Don't worry, just put them in a Dropbox, it'll be okay. It's pretty sick.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.